Hello, everyone. This presentation is on the 2018 ballot amendments. This is going to cover the proposed changes to the Sarasota County and state constitutions. My name is Lourdes Ramirez. As part of this presentation, I'm going to include the official public positions of several state and local agencies, a couple of PACs, a private organization and civic organization, and my own personal preference so you can know what my position is on each amendment. Throughout October, in early voting and vote by mail, and on November 6th, Sarasota County voters are going to be asked to vote on not only state offices and local offices, but also on 18 ballot amendments. 12 of those ballot amendments are going to be changes to our state constitution. One will be a Sarasota County bond referendum. 5 are proposed changes to our charter, which is our local constitution. And both the city of Northport and the city of Sarasota are going to have their own amendments to their city charters. I strongly recommend that you vote by mail, because this is going to be a long ballot and you don't want to get stuck behind someone who didn't get a chance to read it before they show up at the elections office, and it'll be a long line. To vote by mail, you can contact Sarasota Elections Office at 861-8600 or go to their website at sarasotavotes.com. You can ask for a vote by mail ballot and fill it out, and if you like, drop it off at their office. So I strongly recommend with this long ballot that you vote by mail. I'm going to review each amendment the way it's listed on our ballot. It's going to start off with the state constitutional amendment. Amendment 1. This is an increase of homestead property tax exemption. Right now, we currently have a $50,000 tax exemption on our property taxes. This will increase that an additional $25,000 to $75,000 tax exemption as long as the property is worth more than $100,000 up to $125,000. Now, supporters, of course, includes the Florida legislature. They're the ones who put this on the ballot. Opponents include the League of Women Voters of Florida, the Florida Association of Counties, and the Florida League of Cities. Now, the League has taken a position against this because they don't believe tax information should be on our Constitution. The Florida Association of Counties and the Florida League of Cities are concerned about the reduced revenue that the counties and city will receive afterwards. In fact, there will be several counties in the rural areas which will have no income if this passes and will have to get subsidies from the state. My personal opinion is that we need additional property tax exemption, and I would support this, and I would vote yes for Amendment 1. Now Amendment 2 on the Florida State Constitution. This is about limitations on property tax assessments. This is for non-homesteaded properties. Our properties are assessed by the property appraiser at a certain rate. And for homesteaded property, every year they cannot increase the value of that property more than 3%. Now, non-homesteaded property currently can be capped at a 10% increase in value every year. That is because prior to 2005, non-homesteaded properties did not have a cap on how their properties were going to be assessed. And sometimes those properties doubled in value and they paid a lot of taxes. So in 2009, we passed an amendment which caps how they increase the value of non-homesteaded properties no more than 10% per year. Problem is, that's set to expire in 2019. So for Amendment 2, the question is, should they repeal that? And that way we can continue, and non-homesteaded properties can continue to have that 10% cap. That was put on by the Florida legislature, and it's supported by Florida Tax Watch, the Florida Association of Realtors, and the Chamber of Commerce. The opponents is the League of Women Voters, and that's because, again, they don't believe tax questions belong in our Constitution. Now for Amendment 3 of our Florida Constitution. This is about gambling. Currently, the Florida legislature can enact laws to expand gambling in Florida. Right now, gambling is limited and handled by the Seminole tribe and a few dog racing venues. This would change that. This would change it so that the Florida voters in a referendum can be the only ones that can expand gambling in the state of Florida. So it takes it out of the control of the Florida legislature. Supporters of this amendment include Disney, the Seminole tribe, and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. This was done by citizen initiative. Opponents is a PAC. The PAC is called Citizens for Truth About Amendment 3. You will see some literature to try to make it sound like this is about schools, and it comes from this PAC. Don't be fooled. This is about gambling. In this case, I would vote yes and allow only the voters to decide whether or not we want to expand gambling in the state of Florida. Now Amendment 4 of the Florida Constitution. This is about restoring voting rights. Currently, if someone is convicted of a felony, they lose their rights. And the only way they can have that restored is by the governor and the cabinet. This will change that. This question is to allow those who are convicted of a felony that's not murder or sexual offenses can get their voting rights restored as long as they complete their sentences, and that includes probation and any fines. Supporters of this includes the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, and the Florida Policy Institute. Currently, I don't have a list of who opposes this, but I'm sure there will be a few out there. Amendment 5 of our Florida Constitution. This is about taxes. Currently, the legislature can impose or authorize, raise taxes or fees by a simple majority. This just changes it that the legislature can still do that, but it's got to be a supermajority, at least 2/3 of the House, in order to pass any kind of taxes or fees. Supporters include the Florida legislature, they're the ones who put it on, the Florida Tax Watch and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Opponents, again, the League of Women Voters, Florida Policy Institute, and the Florida Education Association. In this case, I believe a supermajority is warranted, so I would vote yes. The previous 5 amendments were put on the ballot by either citizen initiative or by the Florida legislature. The next group of amendments were put on the ballot by the Constitution Revision Commission. This is a group of people who were appointed to that committee in order to review the Florida Constitution and propose changes. This group meets only every 20 years, and they proposed the next few amendments. Amendment 6 of the Florida Constitution. This is about the rights of crime victims. Now, I should mention that the next few ballot amendments are what they call bundled. So they have a few ideas under one amendment. And this contains 3. The first one is called the rights of crime victims. This has to do with what they call Marsy's Law. And it just gives victims additional rights. It also requires that judges and hearing officers would look at the laws and interpret it themselves instead of looking at advice from a government agency, and changes the mandatory retirement age of state justices and judges from 70 to 75. Supporters include the Constitution Revision Commission, since they put it on, 37 Florida sheriffs, and Florida Smart Justice. Opponents include the League of Women Voters of Florida, the ACLU, and the Florida Defenders Association. Now for Amendment 7 of the state constitution. This ballot amendment will require employers or the state to provide death benefits to first responder and military family members who are survivors. It also allows for a supermajority vote for college fees and adds state college system structure to the Constitution. Again, this is a bundled amendment. Supporters of this amendment is the Constitution Revision Commission and the Association of Florida Colleges. Opponents is the League of Women Voters of Florida and the Florida Education Association. Part of the concerns out there is whether or not some of the information on state college system, should it be in the Constitution? Again, when you have a bundled amendment like Amendment 7, you have to pick and choose which you prefer and decide whether you would want to say yes or no on the whole amendment. For me, I will support this amendment and vote yes. Now, Amendment 8 is not on the ballot. It was thrown out by the courts. I only mention it because you'll see that our ballots go from Amendment 7 to Amendment 9, and you'll wonder what happened to Amendment 8. So it's just not on our ballot. Amendment 9 of our Florida Constitution. This amendment proposes a prohibition of offshore oil and gas drilling and also prohibits vaping in indoor workspaces. Again, this is another bundled amendment. So most of us are okay with both prohibition of oil and gas drilling off our coast and prohibiting vaping in indoor workspaces, but that I could see how it could be confusing for some who want to say no to one and yes to the other. So this is a tough one. Supporters is the Constitution Revision Commission. They did put this on the ballot. The Florida Wildlife Federation in protection of our animals off the coast of Florida, and the American Cancer Society. Opponents is the Florida Petroleum Council and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Amendment 10 of the Florida State Constitution. This proposed change adds the Department of Veteran Affairs as part of our Constitution. And the next thing is ensures election of sheriffs, property appraisers, supervisor of elections, and tax collectors and clerk of the courts of all counties. Well, the thing is, some counties appoint these offices, although the majority of the counties in Florida elect these offices. And this changes it so that every county elects these offices. It changes the annual legislative sessions and creates an Office of Domestic Security. Again, this is another bundled amendment, and you have to go through it and say, okay, which part you like, and if you like it all, is it worth putting a yes to this? Supporters of this is the Constitution Revision Commission, 66 Florida sheriffs, of course, the property appraisers, the clerk of the courts, and the tax collectors in the state of Florida support this amendment. Opponents include the League of Women Voters of Florida, the Florida Association of Counties, Broward County, which has an appointed offices, and Miami-Dade County. In this case, although I enjoy the election of these various offices and appreciate that our charter includes election of these offices, I'm also a strong believer in home rule. And if Broward County and Miami-Dade County prefers to appoint these offices, I don't believe we should force them to change it to election. I think it's smart if they do, but it is up to them. So this forces those counties to go from appointed offices to elected offices. Amendment 11 of the Florida Constitution. Property rights and removal of obsolete language. The state has the ability to put into law the restriction or prohibition of non-citizens to own, sell, or buy property. They've never enacted that law, but it is in our Constitution. So this amendment, the first sentence, basically says let's remove that language so that non-citizens can own or sell property. It also changes languages that were repealed by the voters, including that we had in our Constitution high-speed rail. So that's going to be removed with this language. So anything that's old and obsolete, this amendment changes that and removes it from our Constitution. The supporters of this amendment include the Constitution Revision Commission, because they put this on the ballot, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and the Florida Policy Institute. There are no opponents. I believe most people recognize that if we have obsolete language in our Constitution, that it should be removed. Amendment 12 of our Florida Constitution. This is about lobbying. Currently, if a former politician or former judge leaves office, they only have to wait 2 years before they can start lobbying the current legislature. This changes it from 2 years to 6 years, and also adds rules so that there's no abuse by these officers and employees, so they can benefit from some of the proposed changes to our laws. Supporters, again, is the Constitution Revision Commission. They put this on the ballot. The Florida Policy Institute and Integrity Florida. Opponents include the Florida Chamber of Commerce. I personally believe it's a good idea to have a long wait period between when someone served office and when they lobby. So for going from 2 years to 6 years is a good idea, so I will vote yes. 13, and the last of the state constitutional amendments before we go on to the local constitutional amendments. Amendment 13 is pretty simple. It ends dog racing, changes all sorts of dog racing, but allows that those racetracks can continue to do gambling if they have it currently. Supporters is the Constitution Revision Commission. This is the last amendment they put on the ballot. The Humane Society and the Animal League Defense Fund. Opponents are the Greyhound Racing Association and a couple of kennel clubs. They want to continue dog racing. I will vote yes to end dog racing. Now that we've finished with the state constitutional amendments, now we're going to talk about what's in our ballot for the county, Sarasota County. The first one is a bond referendum. Many of you heard about the legacy trail. This is a question whether we should allow the county to issue a $65 million bond payable from our ad valorem taxes to expand the legacy trail from its current location to the city of Sarasota and in the southern end down to Northport. Supporters of this is the Friends of the Legacy Trail and the Northport City Commission. Opponents, they're not current opponents as I've heard so far. I have heard questions about whether the $65 million is too much and whether it is really benefiting the Legacy Trail. I urge you to look into it more and see if it is currently worth expending $65 million to expand the Legacy Trail. Now let's discuss the Sarasota County Charter, since the next few amendments will affect our local constitution known as the Charter. Out of the 67 counties of Florida, only 20 has its own constitution. In fact, we were the second county to adopt the county charter, and that was done in 1971. Our county charter contains limitations on county government, including term limits and spending limits, and also describes how we elect our county commission. Now, changes can be proposed by the Florida legislature, our elected charter review board, or a county commission, as well as by citizen-initiated petitions. Well, now, citizen-initiated petition requires signatures and for citizens to campaign to get the voters to vote for their proposed change. In fact, any change proposed by the Florida Legislature, the Charter Review Board, County Commission, or citizen petitions have to go before the voters of Sarasota County in order to be part of our charter. We will now begin to review proposed changes to our county charter, our local constitution. The first proposed amendment to our charter comes from our county commission. The county commissioners are proposing a change on how citizens propose ballot amendments. This is not a change to how the Florida Legislature or the Charter Review Board or the County Commission proposed changes to our charter. This is just going to affect how citizens propose changes to our charter. The way it works now is that if a citizen or citizen group wants to propose a ballot amendment that would change our charter, they have to go out and get signatures on individual petitions from 5% of the registered voters. Currently, the number of voters in Sarasota County is 300,000. 5% of that would be 15,000. So a citizens group will have to go get 15,000 signatures just to get a ballot amendment on the next election. Now, the County Commission decided to make that more difficult, and they changed the percentage of required signatures on this amendment from 5% to 10%. So instead of getting 15,000 required signatures, a citizens group will have to get 30,000 required signatures just to get a ballot amendment put forth. They also decided to make it even more challenging and more difficult by changing the time frame that those signatures can be gathered. It amounts to about 18 months. So imagine now a citizens group, if you want to propose a charter amendment or a ballot amendment, you'll now have to get 30,000 signatures in 18 months. The supporter of this, of course, is the County Commission, who put this forth. And the opponents includes the Siesta Key Community, Inc. That's my old organization that I've had been part of for quite a few years. We haven't gotten involved in many of the local amendments, but this was so important. We really want to protect citizens' rights to put forth ballot amendments without obstacles. We believe we should keep the 5% number and not increase it to 10%, just like many of the counties in Florida, and just to make it easier for citizens to put forth charter amendments. The last time we even had a proposed charter amendment was in 2008. These are the ones coming from citizens. So it's been 10 years. There hasn't been a lot. And it's true, there are 3 this year, and I know that the County Commission is angered by those 3, but I don't think this is the right time to increase and make it more difficult for citizens to put forth charter amendments. So I will vote no, and I hope you will vote no for this proposed charter amendment. The next one is also a county charter amendment put forth by the County Commission. Currently, our Charter Review Board reviews our Constitution and can propose changes, and it is placed at a county-wide election. It could be a primary, it could be a school board race. Whenever there's a county-wide election, they can add a ballot referendum for us to review. Well, this changes it from a county-wide election to the next general election. As I mentioned, this was put forth by the County Commission, and I oppose it as part of Siesta Key Community, Inc. because I feel that if we place a lot of amendments like we have this year on the ballot, it can get lost. So if we do have a countywide election coming forth and a proposed amendment goes on that, it is probably something we can work on and concentrate on without having it being lost among many, many ballot amendments. So I would vote no on this proposed charter amendment. As I mentioned before, there are 3 county charter amendments that was put forth by citizen initiatives. They got 15,000 signatures plus in order to get these proposed questions before you, the voter. This first one is a charter amendment to reacquire and retain Beach Road that's located on Siesta Key as a public right-of-way. In 2016, the county commissioners vacated this almost 400-foot-long portion of Beach Road to the private property owners that were landward of that road. So this question basically says that should the county reacquire and retain that beach road as a public right-of-way, and leaves it up to you to decide. The supporters of this ballot amendment is the organization called Reopen Beach Road, and the local Siesta Key restaurants who appreciate people coming to that road in order to watch the sunset or to enjoy the beach. The opponents of this is the Beach Road property owners, which are landward of this public right-of-way. I personally believe that this is a good idea and will vote yes on this ballot amendment. Okay, the next county charter amendment is also put forth by citizen initiatives. In other words, they did get the 15,000 plus signatures required to place this on the ballot. It's related to Beach Road. This was put forth to prohibit the Board of County Commissioners from selling or giving away county-owned parks and preserves, and make sure that county commissioners can never vacate any road segments or rights-of-way that abuts any beach, river, any kind of waterfront property. The supporters of this county charter amendment includes Reopen Beach Road, and again, the local restaurants who know that our access to the water is what increases tourism. Currently, there's no opponents to this charter amendment. Personally, I will support this. I believe we need to preserve our parks, and the beach and water access. So I will vote yes. This next county charter amendment was also done by citizen initiative. They received the 15,000 signatures required to get this question on the ballot. This is about single-member districts. Currently, the county commissioners are elected countywide. This changes it so that county commissioners are elected by voters residing in the same districts which the county commissioners resides. There are several benefits to single-member districts. One, it makes the county commissioners accountable to their constituents, makes them responsive to the voters and citizens living in their districts. Now, it also helps the voters learn and know more about their specific county commissioners. It leads to a stable government. The second benefit is it allows grassroots candidates to have an opportunity to reach the voters on a low budget. It is difficult for grassroots candidates to raise enough money to run countywide. It is said, and I know this by personal experience, that to be elected in Sarasota County, you need to raise at least $150,000. And that's tough for grassroots candidates. The supporters of single-member districts includes Sarasota Alliance for Fair Elections, Control Growth Now, Sierra Club, and Siesta Key Community, Inc. The opponents are the big developers in town and a PAC called Stop Single-Member Districts that is currently run by agents of several of the big developers in the community. As I mentioned before, I've had experience in running countywide. It is difficult for grassroots candidates with a low budget to get their message across. Yet, I care about Sarasota County. And if I was elected county commissioners, I would care about the entire county. But I know my district, and my district knows me. And I believe that with single-member districts, we can have an accountable, responsive county commission. So I urge you to vote yes for single-member districts. The county-wide ballot amendments. Now, we have, if you live in Northport, a city charter amendment. And for the city of Northport, they have a referendum which changes their entire charter, replaces it with a new charter. Currently, I'm not sure who's supporting this amendment or who even opposes this amendment. I would just tell you I would be concerned if I lived in Northport that unless I know what is the full language of the new charter, that I would be concerned about voting for something without a lot of information. So I would vote no. The next amendment is just for the voters of the city of Sarasota. It is a proposed change to their charter. It changes the date of the election of city commissioners. Currently, they're being elected in March and May in odd number years, and this changes it to August, November, and even number years. Supporters, there's a PAC called Decide the Date that is led by the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce and several big developers, as well as the ACLU. Opponents to this, I am not sure. I have not heard, but I would tell you that having city elections separate from the general election seems to be a good idea, because then you can concentrate on your city elections. Otherwise, if you have it in a general election, just like this year where we have the ballot amendments, 18 of them, as well as governor, senate, and local offices, it can get lost. I believe that if the city wants, they should have elections when it's better for them so they can concentrate on their elections. Is the end of the ballot questions. For more information, you can check some of these websites. One of them is SarasotaVotes.com. That's our Supervisor of Elections Office website. You'll find some information on the ballot amendments there. BeReadyToVote.org is an excellent website. It's by the League of Women Voters. It tells you who supports, opposes, the pros and cons of each amendment if you want to continue reading about each amendment. There's also Ballotpedia. They're an excellent source of information on our ballot measures. My name is Lourdes Ramirez, and I want to thank you for being engaged, being interested in what happens in our state constitution and our local constitution. And be sure to vote. Share this with as many people as you'd like, because we need to get the word out. Again, thank you.